Story 1: Caravans in the Sand. Life along the eastern desert routes. You stand at the edge of the Syrian desert, near the town of Dura-Europos, around the 1st century CE. The wind is dry and the air carries grains of dust. You are not a soldier, nor an emperor, but a caravan driver or perhaps a scribe, or the young apprentice of a spice merchant. You're preparing to join a long convoy east, bound for distant cities few in Rome can pronounce. The road ahead is not truly a road at all, but a series of memorized directions, wells, ruined towers, and oases. No maps will guide your way. What lies ahead is thousands of miles of quiet monotony, unpaved trails, and long silences broken only by camel groans and the clink of bronze fittings. Dura-Europos, the edge of two worlds. This sleepy settlement, clinging to the banks of the Euphrates River, is not a glamorous Roman outpost. It is dusty and filled with languages Greek, Aramaic, Parthian, and the traders' dialects of the East. Its walls are faded with graffiti from passing travelers. It is both a border town and a gateway. Dura is the first station in a relay of trade. Soldiers inspect the animals. Scribes tally the goods. Caravanners negotiate routes in backrooms using clay tablets instead of scrolls because parchment can't survive the sandstorms. Here, Rome ends and the vast trade corridor of the East begins. A typical caravan might leave Dura with 20 camels or 50 if the journey is prosperous. Every camel is loaded with goods not for immediate trade, but for the next 2 or 3 cities, where they will be exchanged for other goods in a long chain of substitutions. Roman glass, bronze mirrors, and dyed wool begin the journey. They will return if they ever do as silk, cinnamon, lapis lazuli, or stories. The logistics of the journey. The caravan route across the desert was governed not by military might, but by information and hydration. Caravans moved slowly 15 to 20 miles a day at best. Each stage of the journey was planned not for comfort, but for survival. Wells were often controlled by tribal leaders or towns that charged access in goods or coin. Water was the currency more valuable than gold. There were 2 kinds of guides. Pathfinders, known in Arabic later as dalil, who knew the sand and stars. Negotiators, who could navigate the human terrain speaking Parthian, Sogdian, or other local languages. The latter often mattered more than the former. Travelers also included cooks, animal handlers, scribes, and sometimes even Roman engineers checking the conditions of trade posts. Nothing moved quickly, and that was the point. A fast caravan risked missing key trade exchanges or arriving in a city during an off-market day. Along the route, stopovers at caravanserais, desert inns, offered basic shelter, stone-walled squares where camels could kneel and goods could be inspected. Some had cellars to preserve water. Most were managed by local clans or merchants with shifting loyalties. The boring inventory. It is here we pause to take note of the caravan inventory, a dull list. Yet each item tells a tale of empire. Blown glass beads, packed in wool for cushion, sometimes mistakenly thought magical in the East. Woolen cloaks, dyed with Tyrian purple or madder root status symbols in Bactria. Lead ingots, heavy and tedious, yet required for smelting and construction in regions with no mines. Olive oil, sealed in amphorae, leaking and pungent, traded not for taste but for lamps. Writs of permission, stamped with Roman seals, unreadable to most in Parthia but still required to avoid overtaxation. These were not luxurious items to their Roman handlers, but the East saw them differently. A bronze mirror might fetch silk. A crate of wool could buy spices more valuable than their weight in silver. Language, currency, and mistranslation. Each checkpoint along the way meant changing tongues. Latin faded quickly east of Dura. Greek lingered but not long. By the time the caravan crossed the Khabur River, traders often used Aramaic or some hybrid dialect. Sogdian, the true silk road lingua franca, would not dominate until much farther east. Currency was even more tangled. Roman denarii were sometimes accepted, but many preferred Parthian drachmas, Kushan coins, or local silver ingots weighed by hand. Scales had to be checked at every station to avoid fraud. Some merchants carried stone molds to pour emergency coinage, relying on pre-agreed seals to prove their legitimacy. Scribes were essential. These weren't poets or authors, but practical men sometimes enslaved, sometimes free, whose job was to document weights, exchanges, and permissions. A missing document could stop a caravan for weeks. Dangers not of bandits, but of bureaucracy. You might imagine desert raiders as the great fear, but they were a manageable risk, often deterred by payments or alliances. No, the true danger came from boredom, delay, and corrupt checkpoints. Sitting for days at a desert gate while local tax agents debated over tariffs on wool could ruin a trip's profit margin. A single miscalculation on water supplies could turn a delay into a death sentence. Animals would perish first, then goods would be abandoned. Only in rare cases would the humans make it to the next post on foot. Every caravan leader carried logs, some carved into wood, others painted on leather, noting every checkpoint, delay, and bribe. Over decades, this created an informal network of trade knowledge passed down among families and trusted allies. Where the sand blurs borders. By the time a caravan reached the oasis towns like Hatra or Edessa, Rome was a memory. These towns were neither Roman nor fully Eastern. They were hybrid states with their own rules, religions, and governors, often cousins or allies of rival powers. One could see Roman helmets in the markets alongside Kushan prayer flags, scripts mixed freely on stone tablets. And yet in these in-between spaces, trade flourished most. Why? Because neither Empire Rome nor Parthia controlled them fully. The vacuum allowed merchant networks to grow. Caravanners could find respite, negotiate new routes, and gather information about weather, border tensions, or a rumored locust swarm ahead. A day in the life, an ordinary driver. Imagine yourself now deep in the Syrian desert. You rise before the sun. Camels are loaded slowly, the creaking of leather, the complaints of animals, the quick work of adjusting counterweights. The caravan master walks the line, checking for illness or damage. A cracked amphora might need patching with pitch. You eat flatbread dipped in old oil. You carry little water for yourself, most of it is for the beasts. You speak little. The silence is a protection against fatigue. At night there is no campfire, not for warmth, but to avoid attracting attention. Instead, you wrap in coarse wool, sleep in a circle, and let the camels grunt into the wind. You do this not once but for weeks. And what drives you? A promise of a few coins, a chance to see Samarkand or Persepolis, or perhaps just duty. Yet every mile of your journey will feed the hunger of empires. Without you, there is no silk in Rome, no glass in China. An unresolved crossing. Now you are just past Edessa. The desert opens before you. Parthian lands beckon. You know the bribes required. You rehearse the greetings. You hear that a new war may be brewing in the north, but who has time for such matters? The question that lingers as you gaze eastward is simple. How does a caravan survive the Parthian frontier, not just the sands, but the shifting loyalties, languages, and laws beyond Rome's reach? The border is not marked with a grand wall or a marble arch. There is no declaration, no river to cross, no line in the sand. One day the Roman eagle is stamped on the side of a caravan's document. The next, it's a Parthian horseman who squints at your permit, not caring much about what it says, only what he can extract from it. You are now in the Parthian realm, a confederation of client kings, satraps, and semi-autonomous tribes. It is a world with its own rhythms, expectations, and economics. Rome no longer governs the roads, but trade continues because both sides understand. The flow of goods must not stop. You've survived the Roman side of the desert. Now comes the harder part. Nisibis, the counting city. You arrive in Nisibis, one of the most critical border trade cities in antiquity. Though technically a Roman Parthian frontier town, its soul is neither. It is a counting house for the East. Nisibis is filled with scribes, money changers, translators, and most importantly, tax collectors. The city is dusty, cramped, and lined with warehouses built of mud, brick, and stone. These warehouses are not for long-term storage. They exist to briefly shelter goods while their value is declared, inspected, taxed, and weighed again. Here, trade becomes mathematics. You watch a merchant argue over a half-load of Syrian glassware. The tax assessor insists it qualifies as a luxury item, thus incurring a higher duty. The merchant counters that it's intended for temple use, thus exempt. Their debate continues for hours. Behind them, camels chew cud, waiting. It is here that the Parthian delay begins, a known stretch in the journey, where paperwork stalls movement for up to 10 days. If you are lucky, only 5. If your papers are unclear or your dialect off, or if the tax rate has shifted due to a new local satrap, 2 weeks. Yet no one dares skip Nisibis, not only because of its taxes, but because it is where permissions are stamped for safe passage through the deeper Parthian lands. Without that seal, any local patrol might seize your goods or demand bribes exceeding their value. You wait. Trade and tensions. The Parthians, despite being seen as rivals by Rome, are partners in trade, albeit reluctant ones. They do not produce silk, nor do they craft Roman glass, but they control the land between, and that is enough. Their interest is not in goods, but in control of movement. Parthian satraps allow trade to flow but impose high tolls on certain routes, driving traffic to favored towns. They encourage specific merchant families, sometimes giving them privileges while taxing others more harshly. Over time, this shapes trade routes not by geography, but by policy. You may find it strange, then, that in towns like Ctesiphon, Parthian nobles wear Roman togas and dine on spiced wine traded from Syria. Paradoxically, the same Parthians who tax Roman goods are often the biggest consumers of them. This is not a contradiction. It is the balance of power through commerce. Where Rome builds roads to move legions, Parthia lets merchants build paths to wealth but under watch. The role of middlemen. You are no longer dealing directly with eastern cities. You deal now with intermediaries, often Sogdian or Persian merchants, who purchase your goods not with immediate coin, but with credit notes and long-term barter agreements. This web of exchange is intricate. A crate of Roman wool might be traded to a Sogdian merchant for spice, tokens, wooden markers redeemable in India. That same merchant might pass your glassware to a Chinese envoy in Bactria, who offers silk in return, but not now, only when your caravan or a trusted proxy reaches the oasis city of cotton. And you, the caravan driver or agent, must track these exchanges in a travel ledger, often written in multiple scripts. The line items are dull but essential. 3 rolls dyed wool exchanged for 4 Bactrian spice tokens and 2 lines of silk credit. Mistakes are costly. Some traders use pictographic tallies. Others rely on oral traditions, but this is fatting. As trade grows, paperwork increases. In many cases, a Roman merchant may not see the final form of his trade until years later, when a second or third caravan returns with goods earned in this very journey. Caravans reinvented, the Bactrian camel's dominance. In Roman territories, dromedary camels, fast, single-humped, desert-adapted, dominated transport. But now in Parthia and beyond, you rely on Bactrian camels, double-humped beasts capable of enduring longer, colder, more rugged paths. These camels are shorter, slower, but stronger. Their feet are broader, suited to snow as well as sand. Their wool is prized, but their strength is why they are valued. Bactrian camels are not just pack animals. They are status symbols. Merchant houses brand them with marks burned into their hides. Owning a large team means more than wealth, it means political influence. There are rumors of even larger convoys, 500 camels run by Parthian nobility acting as silent partners in east-west trade. These noble caravans never stop for border checks. They are above taxation. You are not so lucky. The forgotten middle towns. As you travel east, your map is made not of cities, but of watering holes and half-ruined towns. One such town is Hecatompylos, the ancient capital of the Parthians. Once magnificent, now quiet. You pass cracked columns, faded ziggurats, and crumbling watchtowers. Yet the town still hosts a few essential services: a blacksmith who specializes in camel gear, a grain merchant who only deals in barley for long-haul journeys. It is not the grand cities that sustain trade. It is these middle towns, uncelebrated, where leaky amphorae are repaired with desert resin. Camel hooves are inspected for rot. Tired travelers buy fermented mares, milk to stay awake. They are the gas stations of the Silk Road, dull, functional, and absolutely essential. Religion along the road. You see shrines. At a windswept crossroads, a simple altar to Mithras stands, marked with oil stains. At another, a carved figure of Zoroaster watches silently as camel bells ring. The Silk Road is as much a religious highway as a commercial one. Travelers pray for safe crossings, not miracles. Shrines are functional, they offer luck, protection from disease, and sometimes just rest. One night you shelter in a Sogdian trader's rest house. On the wall hangs a scroll of a Buddhist bodhisattva. No one discusses faith, yet everyone nods. Respect is practical. After all, offending a deity in a desert might not end in divine punishment, but in being refused shelter at the next oasis. Gossip as currency. Trade is not only in goods, it is in information. Every merchant shares rumors. In some cases, news is more valuable than silk. You learn that. A locust swarm has wiped out crops near Marv. A new Roman governor has tightened border fees. A warlord in the north is blocking a pass through the Tian Shan. You also hear subtler news, that a particular spice blend is fetching higher prices in Dunhuang, that a new breed of camels bred near Kashgar have higher stamina. You take mental notes. There is no newsletter. There are no bulletins. Only campfire whispers and bored conversations while waiting for a wheel to be repaired. An ongoing journey. You have now crossed hundreds of miles from Duri-Europos. You are still not halfway. The mountains loom ahead. The air grows thinner and the days colder. Beyond lies Bactria, Sogdiana, and the long-desired edge of the Chinese Empire, a vague and almost mythical destination for many Roman traders. But before that, there is the matter of surviving the plateaus, the shifting alliances, and the uncertain weather of the highlands. Your caravan is slower now. 2 animals have been lost. A crate of dyed cloth was damaged by rain. A scribe fell ill and was left behind in a border town. You take his notes, hoping you can make sense of them later. The question that follows you now is this. What happens when a Roman trade caravan finally reaches the cities of the Far East not as conquerors, but as guests? Will they be welcomed, understood, or simply tolerated as another passing curiosity? By the time your caravan winds into the eastern edge of the Taklamakan Desert, you have forgotten the taste of Roman olives and the smell of the Euphrates. You've grown accustomed to dried mare's milk, to sleeping curled between camels, to measuring time not in days but in oases and checkpoints. You are now within reach of the cities that lie at the ends of the known world: Cotton, Dunhuang, and eventually Chang'an, glittering not with gold, but with lacquered wood, polished jade, and silk so fine it whispers in the wind. But these cities are not welcoming arms waiting for Roman traders. They are enclosed worlds of their own, shaped by different fears, different dreams. Cotton, kingdom of silk and sand. The kingdom of cotton sits on the southern rim of the Taklamakan, the Desert of Death. Its name is known in whispers among traders in Palmyra and Marv, and always with awe, for it is from cotton that the secrets of silk began to seep westward. You enter cotton not as a conqueror, but as a petitioner. Foreigners are tolerated here, even welcomed, but only under tight control. Your caravan is first examined by officials of the Tarim Bureau, who inspect every crate, jar, and scroll. The customs process is ritualized. Goods are fumigated with smoke to prevent disease. Ledgers are copied in Chinese script, regardless of your own writing. A small tribute offering is expected, usually a Roman item of curiosity, a bronze hairpin, a glass cup, a Roman seal. Cotton is not an imperial city, but it mimics one. It has courtiers, registrars, monks, and scribes. Buddhist stupas rise next to markets echoing with Persian, Sogdian, and local Tarim dialects. The blend is dizzying. You realize here that you are not at the end of the road, you are in the middle of a different empire's map. The trade negotiations. Unlike in Roman or Parthian markets, here in cotton, haggling is minimal. Prices are recorded by guilds, and bargaining beyond a point is seen as rude. You are expected to know this. Silk is not bartered on street corners. It is stored in sealed vaults and only brought out when deals have been pre-negotiated. Roman glassware does interest some local merchants, but it's often converted into local forms, cut, reshaped, or fused into Buddhist reliquaries. You trade your last dyed wool bundles for silk rolls tightly wrapped, labeled with silk stamps and bearing the mark of their origin. They are not for immediate sale. They will travel west again in someone else's caravan, probably years later. You may not even see the profit. And yet this is success. The role of monks and messengers. An unexpected player dominates the trade lanes here, Buddhist monks. Many are literate, multilingual, and politically neutral. Their monasteries serve as resting posts, safe havens, and even document repositories. A few offer translation services. Others provide financial assistance, issuing small loans to merchants in trouble, trusting karma to bring repayment. In Dunhuang, you meet a monk who speaks passable Greek and Parthian. He helps you decipher a Kushan tax notice threatening fees on your glass inventory. Without him, you would have paid double. Monks are also carriers of information. They travel light, with messages folded in cloth. It is believed that some of the first letters from China to Rome may have passed through monk-carried scrolls, written on bark or silk. You reflect on this. Trade is shaped not by kings, but by robed wanderers walking in silence. Chang'an, the distant capital. You hear of Chang'an, but you do not reach it. Most Roman traders never did. The great Chinese capital was more symbol than destination. Trade with Rome flowed through layers, Sogdians to Parthians to Indo-Greek intermediaries, with each link preserving a sliver of profit and a portion of secrecy. Chinese records mention ambassadors from De Qin, the Roman Empire, but these were likely envoys of envoys, merchants posing as diplomats, or Eastern traders carrying Roman goods, never Romans themselves. Even if you were to reach Chang'an, what would you do? You do not speak the language. You would not be allowed inside the imperial compound. You might be received, offered tea, observed, and then escorted back with polite smiles and controlled routes. Still, you dream of it. You imagine the city, its massive walls, its paper money, its engineers, its bureaucrats. And yet your path turns back west toward Marv, toward Palmyra, toward the sea. The return journey, fewer goods, more knowledge. Your caravan is lighter on the way back. You carry silk bolts, jade jewelry, small flasks of unfamiliar oils, and perhaps a single lacquer box you dare not open. But more than that, you carry new names, routes, and prices. This information is worth more than cargo. You update your caravan manual noting that the southern route past Dunhuang is now safer, that a new toll was introduced near Suza, that the water at the Makran wells is salty. One trader in your party chooses to remain behind, having married into a Sogdian merchant family. Another dies of a desert fever, his goods redistributed quietly among the survivors. No one speaks much of the dead. There is little time for grief on trade routes. The caravan as a lifeline. As you pass once again through the oases of Bactria, you meet a new caravan headed east. They carry olive oil, cloaks, and Roman lead just as you once did. You exchange greetings. They ask you, how far to the Buddhist border outpost? You answer, 3 days if the snows hold, 5 if the wind shifts. You pass on knowledge as others did for you. And so the chain continues. The legacy of boring commerce. You arrive back in Duriaropos 2 years after you departed. No one throws a festival. No statues are built in your name. You are paid in copper and grain credits. And yet, a Roman senator's wife wears silk that once sat under your sleeping mat. A Chinese merchant burns incense traded from your saddlebag. A glass bowl crafted in Sidon now sits in a Buddhist monastery in Kashgar. You realize that your life, forgettable though it may seem, helped stitch 2 worlds together slowly, painfully, and quietly. It wasn't the generals or emperors who brought Rome to the east and China to the west. It was you, the driver, the translator, the merchant scribe. And it was thousands like you, crossing deserts not for glory but for trade. A final reflection. As you sit by the Euphrates and watch another caravan prepare for departure, you wonder. What else traveled with those goods besides silk, spices, and glass? What ideas, beliefs, and silent transformations crept across the sands, shaping empires not with swords, but with footsteps? Story 2. The Glassmakers of Sidon, Fragile Trade to the East. You stand near the edge of the Mediterranean, the warm scent of brine mixing with smoke. The Phoenician city of Sidon hums quietly in the background, not with crowds or soldiers, but with the rhythmic hammering of tools, the splash of seawater on stone docks, and the quiet breath of fire from hidden kilns. It is the 1st century CE, and you are neither merchant nor sailor. You are a glassworker, or perhaps the son of one, trained in the oldest and most delicate art of the Phoenician coast, glass blowing. No one will remember your name in scrolls or temples. You are not a builder of empires, but your hands shape the objects that will one day sit in the palaces of kings in Parthia, in temples in Bactria, and even in Buddhist altars near the edges of China. And yet your world is small, a room no bigger than a bakery, filled with heat, sand, lime, and soda. Sidon, city of silent craftsmen. Sidon is no longer the mighty city of ancient myth, but it still commands respect. Along its winding alleys are guild houses, shops, and workshops that feed an enormous demand for glass. Phoenicia, and particularly Sidon, is widely believed by ancient writers to have invented glassblowing, though Egypt and Mesopotamia might dispute the claim. Regardless of its true origin by your time, Sidon is known from Antioch to Alexandria as a city of transparent miracles. You do not make glass windows. That would come much later in history. You make vessels, flasks, beads, and unguent containers, delicate items of beauty and function. Your furnace burns constantly, fed by imported wood from the hills and fanned by double bellows. It takes a week to reach the right temperature. The ingredients are simple. Sand, gathered from the banks of the nearby rivers. Soda ash, brought in from the Wadi El Natron or extracted from burned sea plants. Lime, often mixed in unintentionally from the sand or shells. From these mundane materials, you conjure clarity. The art of the blow. You begin each day by checking the molten pot, a ceramic crucible half buried in the glowing coals. You gather a small bubble of molten glass on the end of a hollow iron tube and blow, slowly, into the other end. This is not easy. Too much breath and the glass pops, too little and it hardens unevenly. The tube must be turned constantly. Assistants stand by with wooden paddles, ready to shape the swelling globe or cut it free. A bead of sweat might hiss into the fire. Silence is required. A single word can break concentration or glass. Sometimes you create identical oil flasks, ordered in bulk by a Syrian merchant who will ship them inland. Other times, you're asked to make more decorative items, blue-tinted bottles, twisted stemware, or dropper bottles for perfume. You prefer the simpler forms. They sell faster and they pack better. Packing for the long journey. Perhaps the most delicate part of your work is not the blowing nor the shaping. It is the packing. Glass destined for the East must survive thousands of miles. One wrong jostle on a camel's back, and your week of labor is reduced to powder. You pack your glass in layers of wool, sawdust, or even wheat husks, and place them into clay jars, wooden crates, or sealed amphorae. Invoices are scratched into wax tablets or painted onto the outside of jars. Some of the glass is traded immediately to merchants bound for Damascus or Antioch. From there, it may travel overland with caravans, or be loaded onto ships heading east through the Red Sea, into the Indian Ocean trade routes. You will never see where it ends up. You will never meet the kings or monks who unwrap your work years later. You can only hope the packer sealed the crates properly. Why the East wants glass. It is easy to forget how rare your craft is outside the Roman world. In the Eastern empires, glass is foreign, a material of mystery. Chinese records from the Han Dynasty mention lulls, a substance that seems to describe glass, often greenish or cloudy, brought by foreign traders. It is prized not for function but for its strange appearance. Some believe it to be petrified water. Others think it has medicinal properties. Perfume bottles are used in religious rituals, sometimes even buried in tombs. Beads are sewn into clothing or used in Buddhist rosaries. Clear glass is particularly valued as it resembles crystal, but is lighter and easier to shape. It is even said that some Parthian nobles embed small Roman glass medallions into their sword hilts, believing it brings luck or balance. So your plainest bottle might become a sacred relic, or a child's toy, or vanish into a desert market with no record at all. The fragile monopoly. Your guild guards the glass-blowing method carefully. Apprentices are watched. Recipes for pigments, cobalt for blue, manganese for purple, antimony for yellow, are kept secret. You have heard rumors of Parthian agents paying off runaway apprentices to start workshops near Seleucia or even farther east. This is a silent war, not fought with armies but with furnaces. If others learn your method, they can flood the market, prices fall, Sidon loses its edge, your workshop closes. Already, you hear whispers of glassworks in Bactria and even near Taxila, producing imitation Roman forms. But for now, the East still wants the real thing. They ask for Sidonian glass by name, or by the crude imitation of it in their languages. Your hands still matter. A day of trade in the Sidonian port. The docks are not bustling with triremes, but with flat-bottomed merchant ships. Boxes are loaded, lists checked. You recognize some of the captains by their jewelry-heavy Parthian rings, Kushan earrings, Indian bangles. Traders arrive not just for glass, but for olive oil, cedar wood, and purple dye. But they linger longest at the glass stalls. You see a Sogdian merchant haggling over a set of 10 bottles. You hear him promise to carry them as far as Samarkand, perhaps even Cotton. You wonder if he's telling the truth. A Roman customs officer lazily scribbles entries into a tablet. He doesn't ask about the glass. He cares more about whether the ships paid their port fee. Your business is invisible to him. But not to history. An open kiln, an open question. At night, your workshop glows. The furnace must stay hot, or the pot will crack and the batch ruined. So you and your family take turns keeping the fire alive, watching for flaws in the melt, stirring slowly with metal rods. The sea wind cools your skin. You smell salt and ash. You do not know where your glass will end up. You only know that it must survive. And as you stare into the fire, you wonder, what if the East learns to make its own glass? What then happens to Sidon, to your hands, your workshop, your name? It is a month since your last shipment left the docks of Sidon, bound first for Damascus, and then to be handed over to a caravan leader skilled in the cruel mathematics of desert travel. You remain behind, stoking the fire, blowing new forms into being. But your glass, that fragile miracle of sand and breath, is now moving through landscapes you may never see. This section follows it across those invisible threads of trade, into the heart of the East. The journey of glass is not about its beauty, it is about its survival. Damascus, the sorting ground. The city of Damascus, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world, acts as a kind of inland filter. Goods arrive from the coast and are divided by route and risk. In a cluttered warehouse near the street called Strait, a merchant opens a crate of your glassware. He inspects it by holding a flask up to the light, checking for flaws, for the slight ripple that gives Sidonian glass its characteristic shimmer. It passes. He marks the box with a symbol, a stylized bird etched with charcoal. That symbol tells caravan handlers that the goods are bound for the east to Palmyra, Nisibis, Hatra, or beyond. Sidonian glass is now just one object among many, mixed with spices, raw cotton, copper ingots, and wool dyed red. But it holds special value. It is light, portable, and considered by some Eastern clients to be semi-magical. So while the caravan leaders grumble about loading grain sacks, they treat the glass crates with caution. If one breaks, it's not just a financial loss, it's a symbolic failure. The Palmyran middlemen. In Palmyra, that wealthy desert city of colonnades and temples, your glass changes hands again. The Palmyrans are not just merchants, they are linguists, deal-makers, and cultural navigators. They can bargain in Greek, Persian, Aramaic, and a rough form of Sogdian. Many are literate in all these tongues, essential for writing contracts that must survive translation. They act as brokers between Rome and the East. They know which towns will pay best for your blue vials and which will want the wide-mouthed jars. They repackage the glass, adjust the wool padding, and stamp the boxes with new markings this time, a combination of trade guild symbols and tax clearance notes. You are long forgotten by this stage. The Palmyran merchants now claim ownership of your goods. But your craft is still visible. A flask still carries your thumbprint where the glass was pinched too quickly. A jar bears a slight tilt, your signature, known only to your family. Desert movement, survival through caution. The caravan travels slowly, following oases and seasonal roads. Along the way, the glass is not traded, not yet. It must reach the proper cities where specialist buyers operate. But it is inspected often. At customs posts, at desert inns, and especially by rival merchants, the crates are opened, admired, and repacked. There is a careful choreography to it. The glass must be seen to be valued but not touched beyond necessity. In some towns, it is even displayed briefly, used to signal that a caravan carries desirable goods, a sort of advertisement, a glint of blue in the morning sun. You, in your furnace in Sidon, may think of the desert as a place of emptiness, but your glass glows in it, catching the eye of men who have never seen the sea. Markets of Merv and beyond. Eventually, the goods reach Merv, a vital city near the edge of the Parthian world. Here, glass becomes coin. It is traded for spices from India, for horses from the steppes, and most importantly for silk. You may not realize this, but the journey of your glass has helped fund the return shipment of silk destined for Roman villas and temples. It becomes collateral, gift, and currency, depending on the hands it passes through. In Merv, a single unguent bottle might be given as a bride price, placed in a dowry chest, or used in a temple ceremony. In the temples of Zoroastrian worshippers, glass flasks might be filled with sacred oil. In Buddhist stupas farther east, some are buried with holy texts, sealed into stone niches. The value of your work shifts from utility to beauty to sacred object. Counterfeits and imitators. Not all glass in the East is yours. By this point in the 1st century, imitation workshops exist in Seleucia, Bactria, and possibly even farther east. These use inferior sand, low heat, and thicker molds. They attempt to copy Sidonian forms, but they lack the clarity and thinness. These fakes are often opaque, bubbled, or unevenly colored. Some traders deliberately pass them off as Roman. But for the trained buyer, a noble, a monk, or an established merchant, the difference is visible. True Sidonian glass is like a water drop frozen in time, wrote one Kushan scribe. The fakes are like cloudy sky. And so your glass holds its place for now. But it is a fragile monopoly, and it is beginning to crack. Tales that travel with the glass. Objects carry stories, sometimes invented, sometimes true. Along the Silk Road, it is said that a Roman bottle once held a drop of Caesar's own wine. A blue flask from Sidon could purify any poison. A cracked jar from Phoenicia still glowed faintly at night. These stories sell. They make your glass more than a container, they make it mystical. In fact, some Eastern buyers specifically request imperfect pieces, believing that flaws suggest authenticity. And so, ironically, your apprentice's error, a fingerprint left unpolished, becomes proof of origin. A mirror never seen. In the Kushan city of Taxila, a trader unwraps a glass mirror you made months ago. It's a flat disc backed with bronze, faintly green. It took 3 tries to blow the piece evenly, and you cursed the process when it cracked. Now it sits in the home of a merchant's wife, who uses it not only to check her hair, but to reflect sunlight into the house, a domestic innovation she takes pride in. She does not know your name, but every morning she looks at your work. An uneasy reflection. Back in Sidon, you receive a letter rare and smudged with travel. It is from a cousin who has joined a caravan as a translator. He writes, "Your bottles are now used in the temples of Gandhara. One man said they were made from solidified moonlight. Another thinks they hold spirits. I told them nothing and let them believe." You read this and smile. But later that night, you sit by the fire and stare into a piece of glass you've been shaping not for sale, just for practice. You see your own face, warped by the curve. You wonder, will the East always need Sidon for glass? Or will they learn to make their own and leave your fire cold, your shop empty, your name forgotten? The years have passed, the furnace is quieter now. You are older, your hands less steady. You no longer make the fine perfume bottles or the perfectly balanced cups. Those tasks have passed to your apprentices, your son, or maybe the neighbor's child you took in when his father died on a ship to Alexandria. But you still tend the fire. You still test the raw sand, still examine the melt for impurities. What has changed is not just your strength, but the world around you. The East no longer waits in mystery. It begins, slowly, to imitate. And imitation, as you've always feared, is the beginning of replacement. A stranger's glass. One morning, a merchant arrives from Antioch with a curious crate. He unwraps a flask. It is similar to your work, the same shape, a similar bluish tint, but it's thicker, clumsier. It bears none of your fingerprint lines, yet it holds together. It is glass, and it is not from Sidon. It came from Bactria, he tells you, a workshop in the Kushan Empire. They say they have Roman apprentices, or perhaps Sogdian ones trained by Romans. You say nothing. Later you test its weight. You tap its edge. It doesn't sing like your glass, but it doesn't shatter either. A feeling creeps in, as slow as the cooling of an untended kiln. The world is learning your craft. How secrets travel. You were always told that your methods were safe, too difficult to copy, that only Sidon had the proper sand, the perfect ash, the skilled hands. But secrets, you've come to learn, don't need to be stolen. They only need to be observed. A dropped bottle in a market, a cracked piece studied by a curious monk, a translator asking just the right questions, a Parthian noble paying a caravan guard for a scribbled recipe. And sometimes your own people leave. An apprentice, frustrated with low pay, joins a merchant caravan as a guide. A cousin with debts accepts a Parthian bribe. They carry more than stories, they carry methods. It's not theft, it's osmosis. And once the fire is known, it can be lit anywhere. Attempts to protect. The glassmakers' guild meets. A few elders propose changes to the recipe. A pigment only found in the hills above Tyre, a new mixture of sand and ash. Others argue for branding, a distinctive mark melted into every flask to prove it is true Sidonian. You suggest nothing. You've seen too many ideas fade. What you do instead is simpler. You begin teaching more carefully. You make your apprentices memorize, not write. You make them understand the feel of the glass, not just the steps. You refuse to let them leave until they've made 50 flawless pieces, not 20. You try, in other words, to make your craft into something too human to copy. But you know deep down that this can only last so long. A changing market. The traders who once lined up for your flasks now come less frequently. They say the Bactrian glass is good enough, that the Chinese are experimenting with their own lulls, using lead and powdered minerals to form semi-clear shapes, that Indian workshops are fusing glass into beads with stunning color, even if lacking in transparency. Sidon is still respected, but it is no longer essential. Your town, once called the birthplace of light, is now one of many glassmakers on a widening map. The glass that returned. One afternoon, a traveler, a monk, lean and soft-spoken, brings you a bottle. It's familiar, not just in shape but in detail. You made it. You know because of the flaw, a pinched seam near the neck. You remember scolding your apprentice for it. You were going to discard it, but it must have been packed and shipped anyway. The monk tells you it was found in Dunhuang in a cave temple. It had held oil. It had sat unbroken for decades. When the monks cleaned the shrine, they saved it, unsure if it was sacred. He offers it to you as thanks for your teaching, your labor, your craft. You hold it. It's aged, dusty, but uncracked. Your mistake made it memorable. Your mistake kept it alive. The glass doesn't forget. You realize then that your legacy is not in the secrets. It is in the imperfections, the slight warps, the flecks of ash, the uneven rims, things no imitation will ever repeat the same way. You know that the East may soon no longer need Sidon, but they will still remember it, not in names but in objects, glass carried across deserts, into temples, palaces, tombs, and memory. And the strangest thing, your glass may outlive your city. Fires go out, guilds dissolve, empires crumble, but glass, if undisturbed, it can last thousands of years. It may break, but it will never rot, never rust. And so, perhaps, someone centuries from now in a museum, or an archaeological dig, or a scholar's collection will hold a piece of your work and wonder. Who made this? Whose breath froze into this shape? Whose hand left this mark on history, silent but unshattered? Story 3, Palmyra, Rome's desert gateway. You awaken to the soft clang of metal and the distant mutter of camels rising to their feet. The sun is not yet over the horizon, but Palmyra is already alive, not with the noise of conquest or celebration, but with the subdued coordination of commerce. Caravans move like slow rivers through the city's colonnaded streets. Ledgers are balanced in cool shadows. Carts creak under the weight of silk, spices, incense, and sometimes secrets. It is the 2nd century CE, and Palmyra stands at the center of the known world's quietest power, trade. You are not a soldier, though the Roman garrison looms in the distance. You are not a noble, though you walk past temples funded by merchant wealth. You may be a caravan broker, a translator, or a warehouse clerk, but you are essential. Without people like you, Palmyra would be columns without cargo. Where Rome meets the East. Palmyra is Roman officially, but it is also Aramaic, Greek, Parthian, and slowly becoming its own thing. Its people speak multiple languages. The city keeps its own senate, its own civic laws, and even its own currency. The local elite wear togas but conduct negotiations in Aramaic or Greek. Priests offer incense to both local gods and Roman ones, Baal and Jupiter, often sharing altar space. You walk through the great colonnade not as a tourist but as a working citizen. The stone columns stretch for nearly a mile. They frame the city's rhythm: men pulling carts, children chasing dogs, and scribes perched in alcoves, recording weight, origin, and destination. Everything here is counted. Trade flows not just through roads but through papyrus scrolls. The Bureau of Caravans. At the city's heart is an institution few outside Palmyra know about: the Bureau of Caravans. It's a dull name for a powerful office. Here you find the ledgers that track every camel, every merchant, every permit, and every delay. The Bureau is staffed by quiet men in plain robes, many of whom have never left the city. Yet they know better than the merchants which oases are dry, which borders are taxed, which towns are closed by snow or skirmish. Their job is not to control trade, but to predict it. You spend your mornings here reviewing recent arrivals: 1 crate from Antioch, 4 bales of silk from Merv, 2 damaged amphorae from Sidon marked as unsellable. The notes are dry, the implications are not. You log them all, carefully, repetitively. This is how the empire moves, one dull entry at a time. The Palmyran merchant class. You work for, or perhaps with, a Palmyran merchant. These are not loud men. They do not flaunt wealth with gold or feasts. They flaunt it with roots. A man who can move goods from Antioch to Taxila without a robbery or a delay is worth more than a senator. A merchant who keeps a warehouse in Nisibis, Susa, and Dunhuang and knows the language of each is seen as more worldly than a general. Their children are taught Greek, Aramaic, Sogdian, and sometimes a bit of Chinese, not for art but for invoices. These merchants are the real rulers of Palmyra. Their wealth builds the temples, their signatures smooth border crossings, and yet they are cautious. Every venture into the desert is a gamble. One sandstorm, one border shift, and an entire year's profit can vanish into the dunes. You respect them, or perhaps you envy them. The Temple of Bel and the sacred trade. Religion is not separate from trade in Palmyra, it is woven into it. The Temple of Bel, a massive complex at the city's edge, doubles as a ritual and commercial hub. Caravans are blessed before departure. Contracts are signed under the gaze of the gods. Some goods are offered directly to the temple, a kind of celestial tax to ensure safe passage. You once saw a merchant leave a flask of rare oil at the altar. He lost most of his goods in a desert storm, but the flask was later returned by a traveling monk, untouched. He believed the gods had preserved it. You're not so sure. But you admit, Palmyra's faith travels with its trade. Even far east, in caravanserais near Bactria, men whisper thanks to Bel or Balshaman before sleep. The desert is too cruel to ignore the divine. Palmyra's role in Silk Road economics. Palmyra is not where silk is made, or where glass is blown, or where spices grow. It is where they are exchanged, consolidated, and redirected. Silk arrives in tightly bound bolts, often passed from one merchant to another without ever being unwrapped. Glass from Sidon is repacked and redistributed under different names, sometimes branded as Parthian or local, depending on market trends. Spices from India come in clay jars. They are remeasured, subdivided, and sent to Alexandria or Rome. The city's genius lies in its ability to handle what others create, and to profit quietly from every step. Language is written in stone. You pass an inscription today, a funeral relief carved in Pomeran Aramaic, with a Greek translation beneath. The deceased was a merchant who traveled 20 cities and knew the roads of the East better than his own home. This is common. Pomeran tombs are not filled with war stories or noble lineage. They list routes, goods traded, cities visited, and alliances maintained. To die with a well-traveled ledger is, in this city, to die with honor. You pause a moment to read the names carved into stone. You recognize one. You worked under him once. You remember his handwriting, narrow, careful, unmistakably bored. He is now a statue on the wall, staring east. A city balanced on dust. Palmyra thrives, but it balances precariously between worlds. Rome demands loyalty. The Parthians demand tolerance. The desert demands nothing but punishes everyone equally. And yet Palmyra keeps standing. It keeps trading. You often wonder, how long can it last? The Romans see the city's wealth and want more control. The Parthians see its cooperation with Rome and grow suspicious. The merchants sense this. They hedge their bets, some sending sons to serve in Roman ranks, others marrying into Parthian families. Trade is not just goods, it is alliances. And in Palmyra, survival depends on keeping everyone satisfied but never too satisfied. A departure delayed. Tonight, a caravan was supposed to leave. It is bound for Susa and then perhaps to Persepolis or even Cotton. But the guides bring news, a border dispute near Hatra, a minor satrap demanding new tolls. The caravan master decides to wait. The crates remain in the warehouse. You adjust the ledger. The camels grunt in confusion. The merchants drink quietly, postponing their goodbyes. You light a small lamp in your office. The city is quiet now. The columns cast long shadows under the moon. And you ask yourself, what happens if Palmyra, this city of in-betweens, ever chooses a side? What would that mean for the trade routes, the merchants, the desert, and for you? The next morning begins with silence broken only by the soft brush of sandals across sandstone and the distant bleating of animals. The caravan did not depart, and that means a dozen tasks are now delayed. You sip watered wine in a shaded corridor, surrounded by blank tablets, unfinished receipts, and rumors. Because when caravans don't move, the city doesn't stop, it waits. Palmyra is above all a master of waiting. Waiting for favorable border conditions, waiting for sandstorms to pass, waiting for Roman policies to stabilize or for Parthian patrols to change shifts. The stillness of Palmyra is not idleness, it is preparation. Today will be a day of negotiations, adjustments, and perhaps a small betrayal or two. The geometry of trade. In a small office behind the Temple of Nabu, a scribe draws circles on a wax tablet, overlapping curves that form a web of possible trade paths. He's not an artist, he's a logistician. Each circle represents a city: Susa, Nisibis, Marv, Duri, Oropos, Antioch. Arrows between them indicate time, risk, and tax burdens. A new toll near Hatra, that path thickens. Snow in the Elburz Mountains, that route shrinks. You assist him, or perhaps you are him. Together, you plot the most profitable route, not just for this month, but for the year. Pomeran merchants think in seasons, not weeks. They must. Trade takes months, sometimes over a year, to complete a single round. Silk may not return from China for 2 years. Glass from Sidon may take 3 hands before reaching a final buyer. And still, every movement must begin here in the quiet scratching of styluses on wax. Power in multiplicity. You meet a merchant named Yarhai, one of the city's quieter influencers. He owns no palace. He sits on no throne. Yet he controls 3 caravans, 8 warehouses, and the loyalty of several border town agents. Yarhai is not loyal to Rome, though he wears a Roman fibula, nor is he loyal to Parthia, though he has cousins in Seleucia. His loyalty is to movement, to the uninterrupted flow of goods. He donates to Roman temples, funds repairs on Roman roads, and occasionally pays a Parthian bribe when a patrol gets too curious. His business card might as well read, "Neutral, always." You respect him. He invites you to dinner not as a friend, but as someone useful. Over spiced lamb and pomegranate wine, he asks, "How long do you think the border with Persia will remain open? And if it closes, how quickly can we move through Petra instead?" You don't know, but you say something polite. He nods and marks a note in his sleeve scroll. Your value is measured in how well you understand the wind. Women of Palmyra, power beyond the ledger. Not all traders are men. In Palmyra, merchant widows often inherit their husbands' contracts, and some far exceed them. The most successful women in the city are multilingual, calculating, and rarely seen in public without a scribe nearby. One such woman, Zabina, is known for controlling the frankincense trade from Arabia. She doesn't attend the markets. She sends sealed instructions, pre-written contracts, and her own caravan guards. Her goods always arrive unbroken. Some say she has spies in the Bureau of Caravans. Others believe she receives visions in dreams. But you've read her instructions. They are not mystical. They are precise. When Zabina walks past your stall, even Roman officers lower their eyes. The balance with Rome. The Roman governor of Syria visits Palmyra once per season. His presence is theatrical: a tour of forts, a parade, a speech in Latin translated awkwardly into Aramaic. He claims Palmyra as part of Rome's glory, but everyone knows the truth. Palmyra governs itself. Yes, the city pays taxes to Rome. Yes, it allows Roman garrisons. But the Senate of Palmyra handles trade policy, border agreements, and merchant law. It chooses which caravans receive escorts and which are left to chance. Rome needs Palmyra more than Palmyra needs Rome. Because Palmyra can redirect the flow of trade. And for an empire hungry for silk, spices, and silver, that power is greater than legions. The monuments of trade. You walk past the funerary temple of the 3 brothers, an ornate tomb built for 3 merchant siblings. The walls are carved not with scenes of war or piety, but with catalogs: goods they traded, routes they traveled, cities they founded trade houses in. In Palmyra, wealth becomes stone. Some tombs even include carved camels, crates, or styluses, tributes to a life spent organizing, recording, and negotiating. These aren't metaphors. They are resumes, carved in limestone for eternity. In the courtyard, a boy sits copying names from a tomb. You ask what he's doing. He says, learning the profitable cities. Even death is part of the supply chain. Eastward through letters. A letter arrives. It's written in poor Greek but clear enough. It comes from Marv, dated 4 months ago. The sender is a Pomeran trader delayed by Parthian inspections. He requests 2 crates of Sidonian glass, the clear kind, not blue. Confirmation that a cousin in Palmyra is still alive. News of Rome's silk tax increase. You draft a reply. You include a coded symbol, a camel facing east, that signals your friend to reroute through Sogdiana. The usual route is no longer safe. The letter will travel with the next caravan, or maybe a monk headed toward the Kushan monasteries. It will take weeks, possibly months, to arrive. And yet the trade will adjust. Because Palmyra adapts, always. An empire of quiet agreements. As evening falls, you walk once more through the great colonnade. A vendor offers fig cakes. A clerk updates toll fees on a public tablet. A child rehearses a Sogdian phrase, probably for a family voyage. The city feels calm, but underneath it pulses with calculations. It is not the legions that make Palmyra powerful. It is paperwork, memory, and trust. The trust that a crate sealed here will arrive in Dunhuang unopened. The trust that a tax will not change mid-voyage. The trust that Palmyra, neutral and profitable, will not provoke Rome or Parthia. You pause outside your small office. The caravan is still delayed. Tomorrow, perhaps. And as you blow out the lamp, you wonder. How long can a city walk the line between two empires trading with both, belonging to neither before one of them decides the balance has tipped? You feel it before you hear it. It starts with fewer caravans returning, then with missing letters. Then, one morning, a shipment of incense from Arabia arrives, untaxed, unmarked, and escorted by armed men who do not register with the Bureau of Caravans. Something has shifted in Palmyra. You stand in the shadow of the great colonnade and feel the breeze, now warm and dry, carry the scent not of the desert, but of uncertainty. Trade is moving, but so are alliances. And for the first time in a long while, Palmyra is choosing a side. The rise of Zenobia. She is not a merchant, not a scribe, not a priestess, and yet everyone in Palmyra knows her name. Zenobia, widow of King Odenathus, regent to a young heir, and now something more. She walks with the bearing of a queen and speaks Latin, Greek, and Aramaic with equal grace. She holds court not in marble halls, but among maps, tax ledgers, and dispatches from the frontiers. Her influence grows quietly. At first, she advocates for Palmyran self-sufficiency, more direct control over trade, more local taxes kept within the city, fewer Roman overseers. Then she starts sending official envoys to Persia, and eventually to Egypt. You hear whispers in the markets. She will not wait for Rome's permission. A man you once worked with, an accountant for a caravan house, quits and joins the new Palmyran army forming under her banner. She's protecting the trade routes, he tells you. You nod, but in your gut you know. Trade is no longer neutral. The closed roads. As Palmyra's ambitions grow, so do Rome's suspicions. A new Roman governor is appointed in Syria. He brings soldiers, not scribes. They march, not through Palmyra, but around it, a symbolic gesture meant to reassert authority. Merchants grumble. More importantly, caravans hesitate. Some routes are now labeled military zones. Others require new tolls, claimed by Roman troops or Palmyran patrols, depending on the region and the week. A caravan bound for Susa is confiscated by Roman authorities under suspicion of unauthorized diplomacy. It carried wool, perfume, and glass. The logic doesn't matter. The message is clear. Rome sees Palmyra's trade as a threat. And when empires view trade as betrayal, ledgers become treason. War on a ledger. You continue your work. You still file reports, weigh shipments, record camel loads. But now every entry feels like a political decision. You no longer write to Seleucia. Instead, it's Eastern route clearance pending. You stop listing Roman tax inspectors by name. Some have disappeared. The Bureau of Caravans adds a new position, liaison to the military. A soldier now stands in the office doorway each morning, pretending not to listen. And then, one day, you are asked to make a copy of the city's trade records, all outbound and inbound shipments for the past 3 years. You ask why. The answer comes not from a merchant, but from a colonel in a Palmyran tunic. Records are the new battlefield, he says. Palmyra declares independence. It's not announced with trumpets. It comes in the form of a coin. Struck in silver, it bears the face of Zenobia, crowned and regal, with a Latin inscription declaring her Augusta and Empress, equal to Rome. Then comes a new edict. All taxes formerly owed to Rome will now be collected by Palmyra. Caravan tolls will fund a local army. All merchants must swear loyalty to the Palmyran government. And so it happens, quietly, bureaucratically. Your city is no longer a client, it is a rival. You feel both pride and dread. Pride in the city's strength, its confidence, its independence. Dread in what must come next. Rome responds. The empire is not quick, but it is vast. In 272 CE, Emperor Aurelian marches east. He is efficient, ruthless, and very aware that Palmyra's rebellion is more than symbolic. It is about control of trade, taxes, and territory. And if Palmyra can defy Rome, what stops Alexandria, Antioch, or Carthage? The siege is brutal. The city resists. Some merchants flee, others fund the defense. You stay. You continue to work in a ruined bureau, updating what records you can, hoping trade will resume. But then the walls fall. The fall of a trade empire. Palmyra is sacked. Temples are burned. Warehouses looted. The Bureau of Caravans, once a model of record-keeping, is destroyed. Scrolls scatter in the wind. Columns that once framed markets now lie in the dust. Zenobia is captured, paraded in chains through Rome. Her dream, and perhaps your city, too, is over. Trade resumes eventually, but not through Palmyra. Other cities rise, Hatra, Aleppo, even old Petra returns to favor. Palmyra becomes a memory symbol of what happens when trade defies empire. What remains? Years later, you walk through the ruins. You are older now. Fewer merchants remember your name. You carry no scroll, no stylus. But as you pass through the colonnade, you see something faint and shallow. A carved inscription in the stone wall, worn but visible. All things flow through Palmyra. May the road never close. You trace it with your fingers. The road did close, but the memory remains. And so you ask yourself quietly, as wind fills the ruins, is it better for a city to survive in silence, or to rise and fall on its own terms, remembered not as a bridge, but as a flame? Story 4. The Taxman of Nisibis, counting coins in the crosswinds. You begin your day before sunrise, the ledger already open, the ink already drying. Outside, the city of Nisibis stirs. Camels shuffle in the sand. Soldiers change watch on the northern wall. Traders arrive from every direction. Roman merchants from Syria, Parthians from the Zagros, Sogdians from beyond the Oxus. And you, a tax clerk, or perhaps just a scribe's assistant, sit in a stone chamber lined with worn benches and dusty tablets. You are not a warrior. You hold no sword. But your calculations can delay a caravan for weeks. Your mistake could bankrupt a merchant or undertax a prince. You work for the Nisibis Customs Office, and in the 3rd century CE, on the eastern frontier of Rome, this is one of the most powerful desks in the world. Nisibis, between two empires. Nisibis is a border city, but not in the modern sense. It doesn't divide two nations neatly. It sits inside a zone of tension, claimed at various times by both Rome and Parthia, later by the Sassanids. Treaties are signed, revoked, and revised with every generation, and yet the city endures. Why? Because both empires need what passes through it. Nisibis is where Eastern goods become Roman tax revenue, and where Roman exports are inspected before continuing eastward. It is not a glamorous post, but it is an essential one. You, seated at a narrow table, are part of that machinery. What the taxmen count. Today, a caravan arrives with a mix of goods. As usual, it's not simple. 20 crates of silk, marked as dyed but declared as undyed, lower tariff. 4 crates of glass, already chipped, hopping for a damage exemption. 50 jars of spices, some of which may contain banned or medicinal substances. A small cage holding exotic birds, not taxable by weight but by symbolic value. Each item must be weighed, described, and declared. You don't open every crate, there isn't time, but you note the seal impressions, check the merchant's permits, and tally the estimated taxes using a rate tablet written in Latin and Greek. If you suspect underreporting, you issue a red mark. That sends the shipment for full inspection. It's tedious, sometimes punitive. You are not paid by the merchant. You are paid by the city and occasionally bribed by both sides. You are not proud of this. But in Nisibis, no one survives on honesty alone. The triangular balance. You serve three masters. Rome, who demands regular tariffs, clear records, and occasionally uses the customs house to spy on Parthian merchants. The city of Nisibis, which collects a portion of trade taxes to maintain roads, water systems, and its own militia. The merchants, who must be appeased or they will reroute through rival cities like Hatra or Edessa. Balancing these powers requires skill. Most clerks last 5 years. You've survived 7. Not because you're clever, but because you're predictable. Merchants know you will waive the overage on dyed cloth, but not on improperly sealed amphory. You're fair, not generous. This earns you respect and a certain degree of tolerated boredom. The flow of coins. Roman denarii, Parthian drachmas, and even Kushan staters pass through your desk. Each coin must be inspected. Some are clipped, others counterfeit. The worst ones are hybrids, locally minted imitations bearing no true authority. You weigh them on a balance scale, check for silver content by scratch tests, and document the exchange rates daily. Your ledger is filled with conversions. 1 denarius equals 1.3 drachmas at today's rate. 1 denarius equals 2 Kushan bronze coins, though quality varies. Local scrip from Pomeran traders not accepted, but tolerated with a 10% fee. You are not a money changer, but you are a currency referee. Sometimes merchants try to pass off old coins once recalled or devalued. You don't accuse them directly. You merely circle the entry and look at them. If they flinch, you apply the inspection penalty. If they smile, you let it go for now. The tools of the trade. Your desk contains no weapons, only a reed stylus, a jar of black ink, a wax tablet for notes before transcription, a scale with lead weights marked in Latin numerals, a copy of the Imperial Tariff Code, updated quarterly, a list of banned goods, mostly symbolic, forbidden texts, cursed idols, live snakes. You also keep a small pouch of coins, your personal funds, a mix of fees, bribes, and salary. You hide this in the lining of your tunic. Everyone knows, no one talks about it. Because everyone at the customs house does the same. When counting becomes politics. One afternoon, a high-ranking Roman officer visits your office. He asks to review the last 5 months of trade records with Parthian merchants, specifically those from Susa and Ctesiphon. You hand him the ledgers, but carefully remove 3 pages. Not because they are inaccurate, but because they list transactions involving weapons, components, bronze sheets, iron fittings, leather from Nubia. These are technically legal, but politically dangerous. Nisibis survives because it does not choose sides. If Rome sees that Parthians are importing war materials, the city becomes a target. If Parthia believes Rome is blocking those imports, they will retaliate. So you remove the pages. Not to hide the truth, but to buy time. Border tensions rise. Rumors come faster than caravans now. A Roman cohort raided a Parthian caravan outside Cary. The satrap of Adiabene imposed a new health fee, at river crossings essentially a bribe. A new Parthian governor in Media has started requiring double tariffs on Roman glass. Every merchant asks the same question: should we still pass through Nisibis? And you, the clerk, must nod. If trade skips the city, you disappear. Nisibis lives on motion. And if motion stops, if coins no longer clink, if crates no longer shift, then soldiers will fill the silence. A mark on the margin. Today, You write a simple note in the margin of the ledger. Delay in spice import, 3 crates missing, merchant claims weather, driver claims theft, recommend partial tax. It is a dull sentence, unimportant. But in a year, that same merchant will be arrested in Antioch. The missing crates will be connected to a smuggling network. Your note will be used as evidence. And you will be called as a witness not for your memory, but for your record keeping. You are not a judge, not a guard. But your ink can convict. An ongoing account. As dusk falls, you look over the day's tally. 1 overtaxed caravan, 2 disputes resolved, 1 forged permit detected, a new wine from Palmyra untested and possibly fraudulent. You'll note it tomorrow. You wipe your stylus clean. You stretch your legs. And you wonder. What happens to a border city when the ledgers no longer match the loyalties when trade demands peace, but empire demands obedience? What will the taxmen do when the coins stop and the swords start to speak? The next week brings smoke on the horizon. Not a fire in the city that would bring soldiers, alarms, urgency. No, this is distant, faint, but it signals something no tax clerk wants to see, a border unsettled. Rumors spread quickly. A Parthian border patrol clashed with Roman auxiliaries outside Duri-Europos. A river checkpoint was burned. A Roman banner was trampled. No one agrees on what really happened, only that something did. And now, every caravan entering Nisibis arrives late, cautious, and missing at least 1 camel. Your desk has never been more important or more dangerous. Taxation under suspicion. Your job, once tedious, now draws attention. A Sogdian merchant refuses to open his spice crates. He claims they are sealed under Kushan protection. You suspect contraband, but know better than to open a box protected by Eastern sigils. A Roman officer demands that you double-tax Parthian goods as a retaliatory measure. You explain that the tariff codes have not changed. He suggests they should. A new decree arrives from the Roman military governor. All shipments from beyond the Tigris must be documented with origin stamps, witnessed by a Roman notary. You sigh, no such notaries exist past the Roman frontier. This is not regulation, it's sabotage. And you are now in the middle of it. You carefully record every discrepancy in your ledger. You mark new symbols in the margins, a habit you've developed. A triangle for potential diplomatic risk. A spiral for items of unknown legal status. A dot inside a square when a bribe has been paid, but not yet acknowledged. This is not just bookkeeping. It is mapping a conflict before the first arrow flies. The crisis of the coin. Trouble begins when a merchant from Hatra tries to pay his tax in gold dinars, stamped with the face of the Parthian king. Normally, this would be noted and converted at the day's rate. But today, a young Roman officer sees the coin and confiscates the entire crate of goods. The merchant protests. You intervene calmly, showing that Parthian coinage has long been accepted here. The officer disagrees. It's not about the coin, he says, it's the face. What he means is, symbolism has become currency. You make a record of the seizure, mark the coins as held for evaluation, and send the merchant to the city magistrate. Later, you quietly send a runner with replacement coinage from your own pouch to avoid diplomatic fallout. You wonder if you've just bribed your own office or rescued it. Either way, the coin does not lie. The political ledger. A meeting is called at the city treasury. You attend, not as a decision maker, but as a record keeper. The treasury clerks, customs inspectors, and a few grim-faced city elders sit around a wide stone table. Topics of discussion. Should Nisibis accept Parthian imports during a time of unofficial hostility? How much reserve silver remains in the treasury, and can it fund a local garrison if needed? If trade halts, how long until Nisibis runs out of bread grain, which currently arrives from the east. You write quickly. One elder proposes establishing an emergency tax on outbound Roman shipments to cover potential deficits. Another argues that overtaxing outbound goods will only push merchants toward Edessa or Singara, costing Nisibis its edge. You make no comments, but in your mind the math is already failing. War doesn't just burn cities, it shrinks ledgers. The shifting routes. That evening, you examine a new batch of caravan permits. You notice something unusual. Two caravans that normally pass through Nisibis have instead rerouted through the Zagros foothills. Dangerous terrain, but less watched. You quietly ask a colleague, why the change? He shrugs, they don't trust us anymore. You look at the maps. You see new trade lines forming not governed by empire, but by risk aversion. Trade, like water, finds the lowest pressure point. And Nisibis is becoming a rock in the stream. A dispute at the gate. The next day, you are called to the south gate. Two merchants argue. One is Roman, the other from Ctesiphon. They both claim ownership of the same crate of dyed cloth mistakenly loaded on the wrong camel. You check the seals. The crate bears markings from both men's caravans. A mistake, perhaps deliberate. In calmer times, you'd send the crate to arbitration. Today a crowd has formed, tempers rise. You step forward with your stylus and declare the crate impounded pending investigation. Both men protest, but your calmness disarms them. You write their names, the crate's contents, and the date. You make them sign the ledger. It is not justice, it is delay. But delay is peace. And peace is valuable. The weight of routine. That evening you sit in the customs house, watching the last light fade across the clay rooftops. The city feels smaller than it did a year ago, not in size but in confidence. You flip through old ledgers. 3 years ago, Nisibis processed 12 caravans per week. Now it's 7. The volume has fallen. The weight of goods, mostly wool, spice, and glass, has shifted to lighter, more portable items. The caravans aren't just fewer, they are more cautious. And so are you. You seal the day's ledger and wonder. When does a city stop being a trade post and start being a fort? When the coins stop clinking, or when the clerks stop counting? You return to your desk the next morning and find that the seal on the customs house door is broken. Not shattered, not forced, just unmarked, as though the formal chain of record-keeping has been quietly abandoned. Inside, nothing has been stolen. The ink pots remain full. The coin weights rest in their slots, but the silence is different. It's not the silence of an early morning, it's the silence of a place no longer trusted. You light a lamp, open your ledger, and begin the day's work. Because for now, you still have a job. Soldiers at the gates. Outside, new soldiers have arrived. They don't wear the usual Roman crests or city guard bands. Their uniforms are mismatched half-provisional units drawn from Cappadocia or even further west. Their commander arrives with military paperwork authorizing him to supervise the customs office. You're handed a notice. In light of tensions with Persia, all eastern goods entering Nisibis must now be inspected for strategic materials. Clerks will report daily to the regional military prefect. It's signed, stamped, and final. You nod, you file it, and you know exactly what it means. The military now controls the market. The last caravans. Only 2 caravans arrived this week. One from Edessa, one from Hatra. Both are half-sized. The merchants carry extra paperwork, heavy with official seals. You inspect them quietly, asking no questions. Everyone is careful now, overly polite, even to scribes. One merchant offers a bribe openly, not in secret, not with a whisper, but with a shrug. Just keep the paperwork light, the soldiers are watching. You refuse, not because you're virtuous, but because you suspect he's being watched. Later you hear that he was detained at the western gate. No charges filed, just gone. Trade, once the engine of diplomacy, is now viewed as espionage. War arrives in the margins. You don't see the battle, you hear about it. A Roman outpost near the river was attacked. The army responded. Skirmishes followed. Parthians denied involvement, but everyone knows better. The eastern gates are closed now, officially for fortification repairs. Unofficially, they are shut to prevent panic. Merchants still linger in the city. Some try to sell off remaining stock at a loss. Others pack quietly and plan to slip away at dawn. You watch them go. Not as a friend, not as a judge. Just as a clerk watching the ledger bleed empty. The disappearing currency. Fewer coins now. Your scale weighs only Roman silver these days, and even that is clipped. You haven't seen a Parthian drachma in weeks. A Kushan gold coin passed through your hands yesterday, but it was rejected by a junior officer who called it foreign influence. You saved it quietly. It's in your pocket now. It's beautiful, stamped with a fire altar and a name in Bactrian script you can't read. Worthless in Nisibis, but perhaps a reminder. That trade once flowed from the Indus to the Tiber, and you were part of it. Even if only with ink and wax. A bureau disbanded. Today, the customs house is officially dissolved. No ceremony, no announcements. A soldier simply hands you a new order, report to logistics, supply inventory. You are now tasked with counting grain sacks, arrow bundles, and camel feed. The numbers are the same. The hands are yours, but the purpose is different. Once, your count shaped routes across continents. Now your work serves a siege. A final entry. That evening, you unlock a small drawer under your desk, the one no one else knows about. Inside is a stack of unused scrolls, a list of caravan names long gone, and one blank ledger page. You dip your stylus and write. Today, the customs house closed. 5 years, 3 months, and 12 days since I began recording trade through Nisibis. Last caravan recorded: 6 crates of Sidonian glass, 12 jars of frankincense, 1 case of silver mirrors. No arrivals expected. War taxes pending. You fold the page, place it between 2 ledgers, and seal the drawer again. It's not for anyone else. It's for you, a clerk, who once counted goods in the brief peace between empires. Echoes of a border city. The buildings of Nisibis will survive. The walls will stand. The streets will remain, even if empty. But something has changed, and not just in politics. The quiet system that once connected the world of scribes, sealers, packers, drivers, translators, and taxmen is unraveling. And in its place, paperwork becomes suspicion, coins become weapons, caravans become couriers of war. You walk home through alleys that used to buzz with languages. Now they speak only in murmurs. And you ask yourself, when history remembers Nisibis, will it see a city of trade, or just a battlefield that once had books? Story 5. The Buddhist Scrolls That Cross the Steppe. The scroll is not impressive at first glance. It is written on birch bark, narrow and faded, the script uneven and delicate. It's wrapped in linen, sealed with wax that has long since cracked. But to the monk holding it, and to the travelers entrusted with its delivery, it is priceless. You are one such traveler, a scribe's apprentice, a caravan guide, or a monk's assistant, moving eastward with a scroll case tied to your belt. You carry not glass, not silk, not spices, but teachings. Your journey begins somewhere in Gandhara, nestled between the mountains of what is now northern Pakistan. The year is around 150 CE, and a fragile cargo of Buddhist texts, written in Gandhari Prakrit, is headed for the east toward Khotan, Dunhuang, and perhaps even Luoyang. This is not the story of war, empire, or profit. This is the slow spread of ideas, carried across mountains and deserts by men in robes, on foot, with nothing to offer but words and silence. The script and the message. In a monastery near Taxila, a monk leans over a bark strip. He dips a reed pen into charcoal black ink and writes carefully, not for beauty, but for clarity. The script is KHRO letter 1E63 letter 1E6D HI macron, written right to left, its curling lines distinct, unfamiliar to most beyond this region. The scroll contains a sutra, perhaps the Dharmapada, or a lesser-known teaching attributed to a regional school. In this time, Buddhism is still plural. There is no single canon. The texts vary by region, by teacher, by lineage. But they all agree on one point: the teachings must travel. The monks prepare copies, roll them into tight scrolls, seal them, and assign them to pilgrims and traders. You are one of those chosen. Not because you are wealthy or important, but because you are trusted. The scroll's protection. A scroll once damaged cannot be repaired. Unlike gold or silk, ideas do not survive fire, rain, or carelessness. So you carry it wrapped in oiled cloth, tied with horsehair cord, and kept inside a wooden tube worn beneath your tunic. You are taught to never open it, to avoid even sweating on it. You are told that the text was copied from a version 100 years old, which was itself a copy of something older still. You are told that if you lose it, you do not just lose a scroll, you lose a voice. In this time, writing is not decoration. It is transmission. It is survival. And it is fragile. The path through the steppe. Your journey leads north and east. You leave Gandhara with a small caravan, not of silk, but of supplies and scriptures. Your companions are fellow monks, or perhaps just hired camel drivers with little interest in what you carry. They know the way to Cotton, where Buddhist monks are said to welcome new texts and make copies in Chinese script for onward travel. Along the way, you pass oases, hermit caves, and hidden monasteries carved into cliffs. At each stop, a monk reads from the scrolls by lamplight. A local scribe, barely literate, listens and copies what he can onto palm leaves or stone tablets. The words are not memorized perfectly. They are transformed, adapted to local dialects, filtered through new metaphors, shaped by interpretation. Buddhism does not fear variation. It embraces it. The monastic network. This is not a lone journey. The Buddhist world of the 2nd century is a network not of armies or embassies, but of caves, courtyards, and copied texts. In Bactria, monks chant in hybrid dialects, mixing Greek philosophy with Buddhist concepts. In Merv, travelers find a stupa beside a Zoroastrian shrine, its steps worn by both traditions. In Cotton, Chinese pilgrims arrive seeking teachings, bringing silk in exchange for sutras and commentaries. At each site, a scroll like yours might be copied, translated, or simply recited, passed on orally when ink is scarce. You learn that a single text might pass through a dozen languages before reaching its final reader, and each one will change it, ever so slightly. And yet the core remains: compassion, impermanence, the path to awakening. Dangers along the way. Scrolls are not always welcomed. Some local rulers fear foreign ideas, others tax religious texts, a few simply do not care. You pass through a checkpoint where a Persian official inspects your goods. He frowns at your scroll case. "What is this?" he asks. You say, "Just words." He lets you pass, but not before squeezing the case to check for hidden gold. You know a monk who wasn't so lucky. His scrolls were burned as suspicious writings. Another was forced to copy a royal decree over sacred verses, erasing the teachings to make room for propaganda. Sometimes the scroll is saved. Sometimes the scroll saves the bearer by earning the favor of a curious noble or a kind scholar. Either way, you carry it on. Arrival in Cotton. After months of travel, you reach the kingdom of Cotton, nestled between desert and mountains. The monastery here is quiet, stone-walled, its gate painted with faded murals of lotus flowers and elephants. A Chinese monk greets you, his robe patched from years on the road. He bows, you bow. You open the scroll for the first time. Inside the monastery's cool library, you watch as two scribes make copies, one in Tibetan script, one in a flowing early Chinese cursive. They pause occasionally to ask about a word. You offer your best translation. Sometimes there is no match. They improvise. Buddhism again allows for this. Later, the scroll will be sealed again and sent on farther east, perhaps to Dunhuang, where cave walls wait to be painted with its words. You may go home or continue on. But you know now the scroll has survived, and so has the voice inside it. A thought that lingers. As you prepare to leave Cotton, you visit the scroll one last time. It now sits in the monastery's archive, alongside dozens like it. You feel a strange mixture of pride and loss. It no longer belongs to you. It never did. And as you step back into the desert wind, you wonder, how many of these scrolls will survive the next 100 years? The next 1,000? Will they still carry the same meaning, or will the silence between the lines grow louder than the words themselves? You have left Cotton behind. Ahead lies the Taklamakan Desert, vast, dry, and silent. But this silence is deceptive. Beneath the sand, buried in cliffside caves and ancient shrines, lies a network of scripture and speech. Your scroll, or at least a copy of it, continues eastward, perhaps carried by another like you, a monk, a trader, or a refugee. By now, it may already be housed in one of the cave monasteries of Dunhuang. And while you may not walk beside it anymore, you are part of a larger truth now. The scroll is only one version of many. Its words are multiplying, not always perfectly, but persistently. Buddhism has begun to write itself across the skin of the world, one brushstroke at a time. The caves of Dunhuang. Dunhuang, at the edge of the Gobi Desert, is not a grand capital. It's a dusty crossroads, but it holds something that no city in the empire yet has: the library cave. Or at least, what will become one. In the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, Dunhuang is a sanctuary, a place where monks carve out caves, not to hide but to preserve. You arrive with a new group, possibly carrying another scroll now, or merely continuing as a servant to a traveling teacher. The monastery welcomes you not with feasts or coin, but with copywork. You are handed a reed brush and told, "We have 14 partial sutras. We must complete them before the season ends." And so begins your second education. Copying as meditation. The work is slow. You sit cross-legged beside a low desk, sand in your robes, candle smoke curling around you. The scroll before you is fragile, the ink already fading, but you trace the lines with care. Every loop, curve, and dot matters. You are copying the words of the Buddha, yes, but also the mistakes of scribes before you. Some verses repeat, others end abruptly. A few lines are added in margins, footnotes or thoughts from long-dead monks. You are not just a scribe. You are part of a conversation across centuries. And you wonder, which version is truer: the clean, first copy from Gandhara, or the flawed, patched version read by a pilgrim in a wind-blown cave, translating for new eyes? Around you, others copy the same text, not in KHARO letter 1E63 letter 1E6DHI macron, but in Chinese, Sanskrit, or early Tibetan. Some work with woodblock carvings, pressing ink sheets into damp paper. Others chant the text aloud while a student writes it down, creating oral-back transcription. The translations are uneven. A Gandhari word for compassion becomes a Chinese term for pity. A metaphor of lotus in mud is replaced with moon behind cloud. A line about merchants becomes a line about farmers, because the reader lives in a rice valley, not a trade town. You ask a senior monk if this is acceptable. He says, The truth is not the word, it is the intention behind the word. And you understand, perhaps for the first time, that Buddhism survives because it adapts. A hidden library. You are invited one evening to a side chamber rarely opened. There, behind a hanging cloth, lies a room filled with bundled scrolls, neatly wrapped in yellow silk. Each is marked in brushstrokes, sutra, vinaya, commentary, or simply unknown. This is not a shrine. It is an archive. One scroll bears the same opening line as yours, but ends differently. Another is written entirely in Tangut script, a language you don't recognize. A third is made of woven silk, not bark or paper. The head monk tells you, some of these scrolls haven't been read in 100 years, but they are safe. That is what matters. You ask why they are kept in secret. He replies, not all emperors want open truth, but truth waits. Paper can wait 1,000 years. You feel again that your work is not in vain. Words that cross borders. A traveler arrives from Luoyang. He brings stories of a Chinese emperor curious about the western regions. He seeks Buddhist texts, real ones, older than the local copies. He wants authenticity. You and the others prepare a collection, a carefully curated version of what you've copied. The cleanest versions are chosen. Mistakes are quietly ignored. Marginal notes are erased. And once again, the scroll becomes a performance. Is it still the same teaching? You remind yourself, the message was never only in the wording. It was in the act of transmission. Winter in the monastery. Snow falls in the courtyard. The walls are cold stone, but inside the script flows like warmth. You still copy. Not for coin, not for power, but because each scroll you complete might reach a reader who needs it in Luoyang or Chang'an, or in a lonely steppe town where a monk will recite it to no one but the wind. You begin a new scroll with familiar words. Thus have I heard. And you know somewhere, another scribe is doing the same. The scroll's future. As you leave Dunhuang, you look back at the cave, the painted figures, the empty prayer flags, the stacked scrolls in the alcove. Your scroll or one of its children may one day be buried behind a wall, sealed in fear of persecution. It may be found by accident, 1,000 years later, by explorers who don't know how to read it. But it will still be there, because even if the voice is silent for centuries, the scroll is still speaking. And that, you realize, is what you've really been carrying all along. 100 winters have passed since the scroll left Gandhara. You are no longer the carrier. That scribe is long dead, and his bones perhaps lost beneath desert sand or crumbled mountain stone. But the scroll or its descendants still exist. They now lie in libraries, caves, monasteries, and palace vaults. Some are protected, others are forgotten. But all of them whisper the same truth. An idea, if copied enough, can outlive its speaker. This final section is not about one traveler or scroll. It is about how a small, quiet regional movement became a continental doctrine, spread not by sword, but by ink, memory, and intention. The court of the emperor. The Chinese capital of Luoyang by the 4th century is a city of imperial spires and scholars' towers. Here, for the first time, Buddhist texts become the subject of official translation projects. Under the guidance of monks like Kumaragava, hundreds of scrolls are rendered from Sanskrit, Gandhari, and other Central Asian languages into classical Chinese. This is no simple process. The translators must invent new terms. The scribes must standardize previously inconsistent verses. Court scholars argue over whether the word for emptiness should be rendered as void, formless, or beyond definition. You are perhaps one of the copyists or a witness to this labor. The scroll that once rode quietly under a monk's robe now sits on silk-covered tables, surrounded by ink-splattered philosophers. Its voice is louder now, but is it the same? Canonization and the birth of orthodoxy. What was once fluid is becoming fixed. The scroll, originally just one version among many, is now being placed into categories. Authentic sutra, commentary, apocryphal text, corrupt copy. Entire sects form around which versions of the teachings are correct. In Luyang, the TRIPI letter 1E6D, a K, begins to form a Buddhist canon compiled and preserved with imperial support. But back in the deserts and mountain passes, monks still chant the older lines, in fatting dialects from worn-out scrolls that would never make it into the court libraries. Which is the real voice of the Buddha? Perhaps all of them. Or perhaps the Buddha's voice is not in the scroll at all, but in the intention of the reader. Scrolls lost, scrolls found. Centuries pass. Empires collapse, palaces burn, monasteries are abandoned, and yet some scrolls survive hidden in cliffs, buried under statues, sealed behind false walls. In Dunhuang, 1,000 scrolls are placed inside a sealed cave, never to be opened again by their keepers. They are forgotten until a millennium later, when a man with a candle and a chisel uncovers them. Inside are copies of the very texts once carried from Gandhara, some still bearing the KHRO letter 1E63 letter 1E60 HI Macron script, long dead, its meaning recovered only by patient scholars centuries later. The scroll traveled farther than its author ever could have imagined. It survived not through fame, but through repetition. The legacy of the scroll. If you sit today in a monastery in Kyoto, a university in Delhi, or a museum in London, you may find a version of that scroll. The words may differ, the letters will surely look strange to the original scribe, but the message remains. It is whispered in meditation halls, printed in textbooks, recited at dawn by sleepy monks in languages the original author never knew existed. It has become canon, but it began as a piece of bark, scrawled in haste, wrapped in cloth, and carried across wind-chapped steppes by a traveler who could not read the stars. The scroll was never a book. It was a gift. The final reflection. You may ask, what makes an idea survive? Wealth, force, fame, perhaps, but maybe it is simpler than that. Maybe it survives because someone took the time to write it down, to carry it carefully, to pass it on to another without glory, without reward. And maybe, just maybe, you listener, are now part of that same chain. Because the scroll was copied. Because the voice kept moving. Because silence was never the end, only the space between verses. Story 6. The Papyrus Contracts of Alexandria. The clerk adjusts his seat. His robe is sweat-stained, the linen chair coarse. His ink dries too fast under the Nile sun, but the words must flow. It is the year 118 CE. The city, Alexandria. You are a contract scribe, a humble gamma rho alpha mu mu alpha tau epsilon upsilon sigma, grammatius, one of the thousands who keep the vast machinery of the Roman Empire turning, not with swords or legions, but with papyrus, seals, and scribbled names. Here in Alexandria, the empire's eastern port of ports, the real power flows through documents, deeds, dowries, leases, debts, and declarations. Each one copied, signed, witnessed, and stored. You are not a poet or priest, you are a writer of promises. And your pen is never idle. The city that writes everything down. Alexandria is no quiet provincial town. It is a cacophony of tongues and trades. Greek in the agora, Coptic in the alleys, Latin in the garrison, Aramaic and Hebrew in the Jewish quarter, Nubian, Phoenician, and even whispers of Sanskrit in the port. This polyglot city must be regulated, and so it is recorded meticulously. Contracts are your daily bread, you write. sales of oil, grain, and sheep. Marriage contracts, often longer than the ceremonies. Apprenticeship agreements for potters, goldsmiths, and scribes. Rental pacts for storage rooms beside the Serapeum temple. You don't always understand the terms, but you understand the format, and that's enough. You have a stack of blank papyri, a stylus sharpened from reed, and jars of thick, gummy ink. And when someone approaches with a bargain to seal, they sit, dictate, and you write. A marriage on papyrus. Today, you write a marriage contract. The bride is 15, the groom 34. The father of the bride is present, though she is not. This is not unusual. The groom promises to provide food, clothing, and necessary comforts in accordance with the custom of Alexandria, and not to take another wife without just cause. The bride's father insists on a return clause if the marriage fails. His daughter will retain the linen garments she brought with her, and one bronze mirror. You write it all, slowly, carefully. Then you add the signatures. The groom's name in Greek capitals. The father's name, a blend of Egyptian and Roman. 2 witnesses, one of them clearly drunk. And finally, your own, written sideways in the margin. Written by hand of Apollonios, clerk of the 5th office. No one thanks you, they leave. You dry the ink with sand, blow gently, and file the sheet. Another contract done. Another life quietly shaped. The archive of the everyday. The records pile up. You do not write poetry. You write detail. How much barley was owed, what time the tenant must vacate, whether the dowry included olive oil or not. You have learned that history does not only happen in temples and courts, it happens in the margins. A note scratched beside a lease, tenant unreliable. A rent agreement crossed out and refiled, resolved by second wife. A sale canceled with a red X, the word dead beside the buyer's name. Nothing here is grand, but it is all true. And that, you've come to believe, is worth more than any inscription on marble. The debt collector. One client arrives today in a hurry, a man with ink-stained hands and a curled lip. He needs to record a debt owed by a fishmonger, 38 drachmae, due in 15 days. He brings a witness and demands 3 copies. You raise an eyebrow. Most debts are written once. He wants copies because he expects resistance. He will take one to the debtor, keep one himself, and send one to the court official in advance. This, you realize, is not just paperwork. It's a prelude to confrontation. You draft the contract, knowing it may soon be brought back folded, crumpled, and stamped with blood. Papyrus scarce and valuable. Your papyrus stock is low. The Nile floods late this year, and papyrus reeds haven't been harvested in full. You learn that prices are rising. Some scribes are cutting sheets in half and writing on both sides. You resist this for now, but when the temple accountant asks for 5 contracts on a single scroll, you relent. You write in narrow columns, smaller script. Your eyes ache. You remind yourself. Every document you write may end up read a century later as a legal precedent or, unknown to you, discovered 2,000 years later in a museum drawer, its ink still whispering of life in Rome and Egypt. A moment of error. You make a mistake. On a rental agreement, you switch the tenant's name with the landlord. The parties argue. You are forced to rewrite the entire contract. Worse, the original must be scratched out but not destroyed. It must be kept, visibly altered in case of later dispute. Your shame is recorded. You now know a clerk's error is never forgotten. It becomes part of the document's life, its scars, its revisions, its story. The end of day. The sun lowers over Alexandria. The harbor glows. Your writing hand aches. You dip your stylus into the ink jar one last time and sign the day's final contract, a simple sale of a jug of date wine and 4 woven mats. You file the sheet, press it under a stone weight, and exhale. Today you have written 13 contracts. No one will remember your name, but your writing will outlive you. You walk home past colonnades, past forums where statues are praised, and think. History is loud, but record-keeping is quiet, and yet it lasts longer. The room is quiet. Not the silence of peace, but the dense, dusty stillness of a records vault deep in the administrative quarter of Alexandria. You step in cautiously. Your sandals crunch on sand scattered to keep scorpions away. The scent is unmistakable: dried papyrus, warm beeswax, and mold. You are not here as a clerk today. You have been summoned. The magistrate's assistant needs a Document A property contract filed 5 years ago concerning an alley behind the market. The alley is under dispute now, and the city wants to know who first claimed it. So you, a lowly grammatius, must now do what no one likes to do. Search the archive. The bureaucracy of a city. Alexandria functions because of people like you and the documents you produce. The harbor tax won't collect itself. Marriage settlements won't hold up in court without paper proof. And when a landlord accuses a tenant of late rent, the magistrate will ask, was there a written contract? So you write, you copy, you record, every day. And when no one needs the document anymore, it goes here to the archive. There are hundreds of scrolls and codices here, bound with cord or wrapped in faded linen, each labeled in abbreviated Greek. AGR equals agrarian lease. VNA equals viniculture notice. MNX equals marriage nexus. TRD equals trade dispute. You sort through them slowly, sneezing from the dust, squinting at faded ink. You find the alley document after hours of searching. You do not even read it. You simply return it to the magistrate with a nod. The system works, just barely. The fragility of evidence. One scroll you touch today cracks at the edges. You realize the ink is lifting, flacking away like old paint. This is the problem. Papyrus is hardy but not eternal. Once bent, rolled, or wet, it warps. Once forgotten, it vanishes. You wonder how many lives, trades, betrayals, and promises have already crumbled into irretrievable silence. You vow to write more carefully, to label your documents better, to preserve what you can, even if no one ever thanks you for it. When documents are dangerous, a colleague of yours, a younger scribe, has been arrested. He wrote a false signature on a grain debt record, forging the name of a retired officer. It was meant to help a friend. Now both he and the friend face lashes and possible exile. You are shaken. You remember the contracts you have bent slightly when a wife asked to hide a portion of her dowry from her husband's creditors, or when a merchant insisted the weight of goods be rounded up. It was harmless, or so you thought. Now you see that documents are not just writing. They are evidence, weapons, shields. You decide to be more precise. The ink dries slower when your hands shake. A visit from Rome. A Roman official arrives to inspect the local bureaucracy. He is tall, impatient, and cannot read Greek. He demands summaries of city contracts translated into Latin, not full translations, just whatever's important. You and 2 others spend the entire week abridging Alexandria. You leave out the details. You skip the line about a dowry's ceremonial linen. You omit the extra clause about goat grazing limits. You summarize a 12-clause property deed as land sold, rights transferred, witnessed. The Roman smiles, he stamps it. You know the version he read is incomplete, but no one will question it. The scroll remains. The truth, or something like it, is still there. The private archive. Not all records go to the public archive. Many are kept in private homes, wrapped and tucked into clay jars or wooden boxes guarded not by clerks, but by families. You are sometimes hired to copy personal contracts, dowries, burial instructions, business shares among siblings. You write these with equal care, though they may never be read again. One man hires you to copy a will not because it's needed, but because he wants his grandchildren to read his words when he is gone. He tells you a tomb will vanish, but this will be held past. You nod. You write. And for a moment, you feel something more than utility, you feel legacy. Writing into the future. You wonder sometimes, what becomes of all this? Will someone find your scrolls 100 years from now? Will they still be legible? Will anyone care? Will they see your marginal notes, a smudge of ink, a faded initial, and wonder who you were? Perhaps they will. Or perhaps your scrolls will be burned to make space, or lost in a flood, or sold for scraps. But while you are alive, you write. Each signature a trace, each scroll a mark. And perhaps, buried in some vault beneath a collapsed market stall, your writing will wait to speak again. You return to the archive years later. But it is not the same. The paint has flaked from the walls and the ledgers are out of order. The magistrate's seal lies cracked on the floor, forgotten. The papyri, once carefully sorted, now sag in bundles, damp, yellowing, half-eaten by mildew and mice. The empire is faltering. You are older now, slower, your sight fading, but still your hand knows the forms, still you write. And you wonder, how much longer? How much longer will Alexandria keep filing its contracts, its debts, its marriages? And when the scribes are gone and the courts are silent, what happens to the scrolls? The system phrase. By the late 3rd century CE, the Roman world has entered a state of perpetual emergency. Armies march east, then west. Grain shipments are stolen or lost. Governors come and go like tides. Taxes are raised, missed, rewritten. The clerks, once numerous, begin to disappear. Some flee, others die. A few, like you, remain, faithfully transcribing transactions that may never be enforced. You write for people who no longer trust the courts. You copy contracts for land that has already been seized by soldiers. You document debts owed in coin no longer minted. And still people come to you. Why? Because to them, a written agreement still means something. A contract may not stop a soldier, but it might delay him. A scroll may not ensure justice, but it might remind someone what was once promised. The fire and the flood. One summer, a fire breaks out near the archive district. You see smoke rising from the east quarter. By the time you arrive, the air is thick with ash. Scribes are pulling boxes of scrolls from the buildings, stacking them on carts. Some burn, others are soaked to save them, their ink running like tears. You help rescue what you can. One of your earliest scrolls, a land lease from 30 years ago, is partially scorched. You cradle it in your hands. It smells of vinegar and smoke. You remember the tenant's name. You recall his complaint, too many pebbles in the soil. He is surely dead now. But his words remain barely. Contracts without enforcers. A man approaches your desk. He wants to register a marriage. You ask for witnesses, but he has none. His family is gone, his village raided. His bride stands beside him in silence. You draft a simplified contract. You sign for both witnesses. You date it by the old calendar, though no one is quite sure what day it is anymore. You still use the imperial formula, under the reign of the divine emperor. But you no longer know who that is. The empire is still alive, but its heartbeat feels distant, barely audible from this dusty city at the edge of order. Burial of a bureaucracy. Eventually, you are asked to close the archive. A new official, sent from Constantinople, declares that record-keeping must now be centralized. Greek script is to be phased out. Latin is preferred. Documents are to be sent elsewhere for copying or destroyed. You protest, you are ignored. You spend your final weeks binding bundles of contracts. Some you burn per order. Others, the ones that feel important, you quietly seal in jars, tuck into unused rooms, and cover with tiles and sand. You do this not because you believe they will be found, but because you believe they matter. Because you believe someone someday will want to know what this city wrote about itself. Death of a scribe. You die in your home, quietly, unnoticed. The neighbors remember you as the man who wrote everything down. A few of your personal scrolls are used to light fires. But in a basement, beneath the rubble of what was once a registry office, several bundles remain untouched. They wait. Centuries pass. Empires fall. Libraries are looted. Languages are forgotten. And then, one day in the 19th century, a European archaeologist uncovers a clay jar in the Egyptian dust. Inside, papyrus contracts from Alexandria. You're writing your hand. Your cramped formal script. Still readable. Still here. Final reflection. So much of history is lost. Kings fall, temples crack, statues are toppled. But the contract for the sale of 2 goats, still intact. The lease on a dusty olive grove, still legible. The promise to repay 14 drachmae before the full moon, still binding in a way. You, the scribe, never ruled, never marched, never prayed before marble altars. But you wrote. And in that writing, you preserved the texture of life, the mundane, the minor, the real. And it is these scrolls, not proclamations, not prophecies, that tell the world what Alexandria truly was. A city that remembered, one papyrus at a time,